The single mom waitress collapsed after her shift. The mafia boss lifted her gently. The neon sign of the gull and anchor flickered, buzzing a desperate rhythm against the pane glass. Outside, Port Greystone was drowning. Lake Michigan wasn't just tapping at the windows, it was throwing punches. A heavy, wind-driven rain that made the whole diner smell like wet asphalt and old fish. It was late, or early, depending on which side of sleep you were on. For me, it was just the end. The end of a triple, 24 hours on my feet, fueled by stolen sips of flat cola and the acidic burn of panic in my throat. My name is Mara Quinn. I am 26 years old, and I am a professional ghost, haunting the linoleum floors of this dockside greasy spoon. My manager, Sykes, had already pocketed half my tips, claiming a dine and dash from table 4 that I knew had paid in cash. He did it just to watch my face fall. He knew I wouldn't fight back. I couldn't. Not when fighting back meant the end of the paycheck that kept the mold in my apartment from winning, that kept the inhaler for my son, Eli, filled. My feet were numb, 2 blocks of ice shoved into sneakers so worn the soles flapped. All I had to do was gather the dirty rags from the bus station, dump them in the bleach bucket, and I could go. I could retrieve my boy from the dry storage closet, wrap him in my jacket, and walk the 12 blocks home in the freezing rain. I reached for the pile of gray towels. The room tilted. It wasn't a gentle spin. It was a lurch, like the floor falling away from me. The buzzing of the neon sign amplified, filling my head until it was the only sound in the universe. Black spots bloomed in my vision, swallowing the red vinyl of the booths, the chrome counter, the face of Sykes himself. My hand closed on air. My knees gave out. The bell above the door jangled, a sound lost in the rush of blood in my ears, a blast of cold. Wet air hit my face, smelling of the deep lake and something else, something clean and sharp, like iron and expensive wool. A group of men. That was my last coherent thought. Dark coats, wet from the storm, moving with a purpose that didn't belong in a 2-bit diner at 3 a.m. Then I was falling. I heard a glass shatter when I must have knocked from the station, and the sound seemed to come from a mile away. I braced for the impact, for the sting of the wet, gritty tile against my cheek. It never came. Strong arms intercepted me, one sliding behind my back, the other scooping under my knees. I was lifted, effortlessly, as if I weighed nothing more than the dirty rags I'd been reaching for. I was pulled against a chest so solid it felt like a bulkhead, and the clean, iron and wool scent enveloped me. I gasped, my lungs finally remembering their job. My vision swam back into focus, blurring on the lapel of a perfectly tailored black coat. "Calm," a voice commanded, low and smooth right by my ear. It wasn't a suggestion. Breathe slow. It was an order, delivered with such absolute certainty that the storm outside, my failing body, even my panic, seemed to pause, waiting for its next instruction. "What the hell?" Quinn Sykes' voice cracked through the quiet. "That's coming out of your pay. Get off the floor. You're scaring the customers." I flinched, trying to pull away from the man holding me, trying to apologize, trying to get up and clean the glass. But the arms didn't release me. The man holding me didn't even turn his head. He simply looked toward the door. 2 other men, broad-shouldered and silent, immediately stepped back and closed it. The heavy wooden door clicked shut, severing the sound of the wind and the rattling sign. The diner fell into a sudden, vacuum-sealed silence. The only sound was the drip of water from their coats onto the floor. Sykes' mouth hung open, his threat dying on his lips. The man turned, carrying me as if I were a child, and gently, so gently it made my throat ache, he laid me down on the cracked vinyl of the nearest booth. I sank into the seat, my limbs trembling, my head spinning. He stood over me for a second, just looking. His face was all angles, sharp and defined, with dark eyes that weren't just observing me, they were assessing, calculating. He was young, maybe 32, but his gaze was ancient. He was, I realized with a jolt, beautiful, in the way a panther is beautiful, dangerous, sleek, and utterly in control. He moved away, not towards Sykes, but behind the counter. I watched, dizzy, as he grabbed a clean glass, added sugar from the dispenser, a shake of salt from the kitchens, and filled it with warm water from the tap. He stirred it once with a long spoon and slid it in front of me. Drink. I stared at the glass. My hands were shaking too hard to lift it. He sighed, a quiet sound of impatience, and sat opposite me. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing my temple as he tucked a strand of wet, greasy hair behind my ear. The touch was feather-light, impersonal, and yet it sent a jolt straight down my spine. His eyes dropped, tracing the line of my jaw, then moving lower. He saw the faded purple bruise on my wrist from where I'd caught it on a beer keg. He saw the duct tape holding the toe of my left sneaker together. He saw everything. And then his eyes lifted, moving past me, toward the back of the diner, toward the dry storage closet. My heart stopped. "Eli!" I tried to sit up, a raw panic giving me a burst of strength. "No, please, he's sleeping." The man's voice cut me off. Quiet, but absolute. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He gave a slight nod to the man standing nearest to the closet. The man, who looked like he could break Sykes in half with one hand, moved silently toward the door, eased it open, and peered inside. I could see him from my angle, see the slight softening of his posture as he looked at my 4-year-old son, curled up on 2 50-pound sacks of flour. Fast asleep, the silent man slipped off his own dark wool overcoat, folded it once, and gently draped it over Eli like a blanket. He never made a sound. He just covered my boy in a coat that probably cost more than my last 6 months' rent and stepped back, blending into the shadows. A hot, stinging tear slid down my cheek. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was the shock of it, the kindness, so precise and unexpected, delivered by men who looked like they broke bones for a living. "You can't do that!" Sykes suddenly found his voice, high and reedy. He was pointing at the closet, his face mottled with rage. "That's a health code violation. Bringing your kid to work. You're fired, Quinn. Get your brat and get out." The man in the booth with me turned his head slowly. He looked at Sykes. He didn't speak. He just looked. And in that look, I saw the bottom of the lake, cold, dark, and final. Sykes visibly shrank, his pointing hand falling to his side. The man was Raffaele Calderone. I knew the name. Everyone in Port Greystone knew the name. The Harbor Light Circle? They didn't just control the docks and the shipping. They controlled the water, the unions, the quiet currents of power that decided who worked and who starved. He was a ghost story told by truckers, a quiet rumor of a boss who was more surgeon than butcher. Rafe Calderone turned back to me. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a wallet. It was thick, black leather. He didn't count. He just pulled out a stack of bills, hundreds, and dropped them on the counter. "That covers her glass, her wages for the night, and every open ticket in this dump." His voice was still quiet, but it filled the room. He stood up, towering over the counter. Sykes stared at the money, mesmerized and terrified. Rafe Calderone then pulled out a business card. It was heavy stock, matte black with simple, embossed silver lettering. He didn't hand it to Sykes. He slid it across the table until it stopped right in front of my trembling hands. "Tomorrow," he said, his dark eyes locking onto mine. 10 o'clock, Harbor Pier 7, my office. I swallowed, my throat dry. I don't understand, for a job." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Acknowledgement, perhaps. "Not for a serving job," he clarified. "It's so I can protect you." He turned, the hem of his long coat swirling around his legs. His men fell into step behind him, a phalanx of shadows. The bell on the door jangled softly. The cold, wet wind rushed back in, and then they were gone. I was left in the buzzing silence of the diner, with a puddle of money on the counter and the smell of iron and wool lingering in the air. Sykes wouldn't meet my eyes. My hand crept forward, my fingers closing around the sharp, expensive edges of the card, Harbor Pier 7, the heart of the Harbor Light Circle. For the first time in years, since before Eli was born, since before I became this hollowed-out version of myself. I felt something other than exhaustion. It felt like a door opening. But I knew, standing in the cold, wet air of the Gull and Anchor, that whatever door this was, it didn't lead to the light. It led straight into another kind of darkness, one far deeper and more dangerous than the alleys of Port Greystone. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that at 10 o'clock tomorrow, I would walk right through it. Home wasn't a place, it was a smell. It was the damp rot of drywall that never dried, the sharp tang of mold creeping up from the windowsills, and the underlying scent of Lake Michigan in its sourest mood. My apartment in the Dockside District was a third-floor walk-up in a brick tenement that had been declared historic, so the owner, Dorian Slate, could avoid fixing the plumbing while tripling the rent under the guise of neighborhood revitalization. Revitalization just meant the Starbucks 2 blocks over pushed the poverty 1 block closer to the water. I counted the bills from Sykes's counter, $600, and set them on my kitchen table. Then I looked at the other pile, the pile of paper that really mattered. A final notice from Port Greystone Electric, a bill from Eli's pulmonologist, stamped in red, a warning from the pharmacy that our co-pay assistance was ending. My son, my beautiful 4-year-old boy, had lungs that fought him. His severe asthma was a constant, wheezing monster in the corner, kept at bay only by a nebulizer that sounded like a failing engine and medicine that cost more than food. The $600 didn't even cover the overdue medicals. Eli's father, Travis Pike, hadn't been seen in months. He was a man of big promises and bigger tempers, a longshoreman who'd racked up debts with people you don't rack up debts with, and then vanished, leaving nothing behind but his last name, which Eli and I didn't share, and a hole in our lives. On a shelf above the leaking radiator sat a few dusty textbooks, Principles of Form, The Ergonomics of Space. I'd wanted to be an interior designer once. I had a good eye for how a room should flow, how light could change a space. Now, my entire world of design was limited to how I arranged the medicine bottles on Eli's dresser, a desperate kind of feng shui to ward off the next attack. My dreams were packed away in a cardboard box, right next to the breathing machine. I checked my phone, a cheap prepaid with a cracked screen. 7:30 in the morning, I had 2.5 hours. I'd barely slept, my mind replaying the moment Rafe Calderon had lifted me, the feeling of absolute, terrifying stability in his arms. A new message pinged, an unknown number. "We know you signed the Gull and Anchor petition. Be smart, be sick tomorrow. Your memory isn't good? Stay home." A cold spike of adrenaline shot through me, sharper than any caffeine. The petition, 6 months ago, after a cook got a 3rd-degree burn from faulty wiring, I'd signed a collective complaint about unsafe labor conditions. We all had. We'd sent it to the Internal Mercantile Office, the IMO, the city agency that was supposed to protect us. Nothing had happened. Until now, until the day I was supposed to walk into the office of the most powerful man on the harbor. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a warning. And it smelled like Sykes, like Dorian Slate, like the whole rotten structure of Port Greystone. The official channels and the criminal ones were just different pipes leading to the same sewer. I deleted the message, my hand shaking. Staying home wasn't an option. Staying home was a slow death by mold and medical debt. By 9:45, I was standing at the entrance to Harbor Pier 7. The fog was so thick it swallowed the tops of the cranes, making them look like headless iron giants. The air was cold, clean, and smelled of diesel and deep water. This was Rafe Calderon's world. It was functional, massive, and intimidating. I pulled my thin jacket tighter, the black business card feeling heavy and hot in my palm. I walked past security guards who didn't look like security guards. They looked like the men from the diner, quiet, watchful, and built of solid muscle. They just nodded as I approached the main office, a low-slung building of modern steel and glass perched at the very end of the pier, surrounded on 3 sides by the churning gray lake. They were expecting me. The door opened into a space that was the exact opposite of my apartment. It was minimalist, clean and silent. The floors were dark, polished oak. There was no art, except for a massive, framed nautical chart of the Great Lakes that covered one entire wall, marked with shipping lanes and depths. The air smelled of that oak and good coffee. He was standing in front of the window, looking out at the fog. He wore a simple gray Henley that strained across his shoulders and dark trousers. No suit, no armor. He turned as I entered, and those same dark, assessing eyes landed on me. "You came." It wasn't a question. "You paid for my time," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I paid for your manager to disappear," he corrected me, his voice smooth. "Sykes was fired at 4:01 this morning for health code violations, specifically rodents." He gestured to a chair. "Sit, Miss Quinn." I remained standing. "What did you mean, protect me?" He let out a small sigh, almost of approval. "The Municipal Maritime Bureau keeps detailed files. I like to read." This was his way of saying he'd run a check. Mara Quinn, 26, top of your class, Greystone Community College, Associates in Design, dropped out 3 credits shy of graduation. 1 son, Eli, 4, chronic asthma, father, Travis Pike, outstanding warrants for assault, whereabouts unknown. You have 0 criminal record. You have 3 maxed out credit cards. You signed a petition against your employer that was forwarded to the Internal Mercantile Office, an organization known for making petitions and petitioners disappear. He knew. He knew everything. The text message this morning wasn't a surprise to him. It was a symptom of the disease he already understood. "You're not desperate, Miss Quinn," he continued, walking slowly toward me. "You're trapped, and you're about to be crushed. By the IMO by the diner. By Dorian Slate. By the system that allows men like him and Sykes to operate." He stopped a few feet from me. "I'm offering you a way out. Not charity, a job." I braced myself, wiping down tables in a club you own. A flicker of a smile touched his lips. "No. I have a legitimate entity. The Harbor Light Community Kitchen Fund. It provides hot meals to dock workers and their families. The spaces are inefficient, badly designed. They waste energy. They flow poorly. They're depressing." He nodded toward my worn-out bag, where the corner of one of my old textbooks was visible. "You know how to fix that. I've seen your student work online. It's good. Practical. You understand ergonomics." He looked up my old college projects. The thoroughness of it chilled me and impressed me. "The position is temporary. Project-based, redesign 3 kitchens. Starting today. You'll have a budget and a team. In exchange, the fund will provide you with a full salary, relocation to a secure apartment, and a private medical insurance plan that, as of this morning, already includes Eli." My breath hitched. Insurance, real insurance, not the state aid junk that fought me on every prescription. "Why?" I whispered. "Why me? It's too much for designing a kitchen." "Because I can't have the IMO or Slate leaning on someone who works for me. It's bad for business." He was offering me a shield, a very large, very dangerous shield. "The Harbor Light Circle?" I said, tasting the name. "That's what they call you. They say you're a gangster, that you own the cops, that people who cross you end up at the bottom of the lake." Rafe didn't deny it. He didn't even blink. He just held my gaze, his honesty as sharp as a blade. "They're not entirely wrong. I am the man in the middle. I don't touch narcotics. I don't deal in human misery. I control the port to keep order, to keep the poison from the East Coast out of my city. And in return," he said, his voice dropping, "I crush men who prey on the weak. Men like Sykes, men like Slate, men who send threatening texts to single mothers who just want to keep their children safe." He saw the shock on my face. He knew about the text. Of course he did. He was offering me a deal with the devil, but the devil was offering my son the one thing heaven hadn't a chance to breathe. "I have conditions," I said, my voice shaking but firm. He tilted his head. "Go on. I won't do anything illegal. I won't lie. I won't smuggle. I won't be a part of the rest of it. This job is clean," he said. And Eli, he has to be safe, not just insured, safe. They won't touch you again, Rafe said. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact. Not Sykes, not the IMO, not anyone. He took a small step closer. I'd sign it in blood if I had to. I believed him. God help me. I believed him. Okay. I held out my hand. It was trembling, pale, and chapped from bleach water. Raffaele Calderone looked at my hand for a long moment, then enclosed it in his. His grip was warm, dry, and incredibly strong. It wasn't a handshake. It was an anchor. For the first time, looking into those dark, dangerous eyes, I didn't just see power. I saw a promise. And I knew I'd just traded one kind of prison for another. But at least this one had a window, and the air was clean. The first week was a blur of survival and disbelief. Work. Real work. It wasn't just a title. It was a clipboard, a measuring tape, and a budget. I threw myself into the redesign of the first community kitchen, located in a drafty warehouse on the south side. The space was cold, the lighting was fluorescent and unforgiving, and the airflow was non-existent. I knew exactly what to do. I'd spent countless nights on labor forums and design threads, learning how others fix the unfixable on zero budget. I sketched layouts that separated the hot prep areas from the cold storage, optimizing the flow to prevent collisions. I sourced recycled, food-grade stainless steel from a shipyard surplus contact, cutting the material cost by 40%. I designed ventilation hoods that actually vented outside, instead of just circulating the grease-filled air. This wasn't the high-end design of my dreams, but it was real. It was practical. It was about keeping people safe, about making their grueling 8-hour shift a little less grueling. It was the first time in years my brain felt clear. But the real change, the one that made me cry in the privacy of my new, clean, temporary apartment, happened at the North Bay Health Post. It was a small, private clinic Rafe's insurance covered. The doctor, a kind woman with tired eyes, listened. She actually listened to Eli's breathing, checked his charts, and adjusted his medication. She gave me a new portable nebulizer, one that was silent and battery-powered. "He's resilient," she said, handing Eli a small, bright red toy dump truck. Eli, who usually hid behind my legs, took the truck and stared at it, his eyes wide. He looked up at the doctor and gave her a smile that lit up the room. He hadn't smiled like that in months. He was breathing easier. I was breathing easier. This was what Rafe's protection looked like. It wasn't just muscle, it was medicine. A few days later, Rafe appeared at the kitchen site. He walked through the space, his dark coat an anomaly against the dusty concrete. He didn't say much, just watched me direct the installation of the steel counters. "You're good at this," he stated, running a hand along a perfectly sealed seam. "I follow instructions." "No," he said, meeting my eyes. "You give them, come with me. I need you to look at another space." The other space was not a kitchen. It was Pier 12, a massive, echoing warehouse at the far end of the harbor, smelling of rust and dead water. We stood on the loading dock, the gray fog rolling in thick off the lake. He pointed with his chin toward the water. A barge was being unloaded, its containers stacked high. They were different from the standard blue and red boxes. These were gray, marked with a strange, stenciled logo, a simple crown made of tin. "Tin crown," I said, reading the side. "They're new," Rafe said, his voice tight. "The Heller brothers, Wyatt and Boone. They think because they control the railways, they can control the inland routes. They're moving contraband, not my business, but now they're trying to move it through my water." He looked at me, gauging my reaction. They do it by buying off officials. The Fiscal Integrity Commission, the FIC, they get fake customs clearance, move their product through the port disguised as legitimate cargo, and it disappears onto their trains. "And you suspect they have someone inside your operation," I finished, understanding the tension in his shoulders. "I suspect everyone." He turned away from the water. "I just wanted you to see the logo. Remember it." The warning settled in my gut like cold lead. This was the other side of the insurance plan. This was the price of admission. I went back to the kitchen project. The image of that tin crown burned into my mind. I was cross-referencing the invoices for the kitchen build-out, making sure the suppliers were charging us correctly. The fund was Rafe's legitimate face. It had to be spotless. I was looking at the manifest for the butcher blocks. Beautiful. Heavy maple, sourced by our primary contractor from a company called Greystone Timber and Tile. It was expensive, but durable. I was checking the shipping codes against the order form when my blood went cold. At the bottom of the manifest, next to the freight identifier, was a small, blurry logo. A crown made of tin. I stared at it, my heart hammering. It was subtle, just part of the shipping paperwork. I pulled up the invoices from the steel supplier. They were clean, the concrete clean, but the wood, the most expensive, porous material in the kitchen was coming from a shadow supplier, routed through Greystone Timber, using a tin crown freight code. They weren't just moving contraband, they were washing it. They were smuggling illegal goods. Maybe the wood itself was treated with something. Or maybe it was just a way to launder the money and they were using my project, Rafe's Community Kitchen, as the legitimate buyer. They were turning his charity into a shell corporation without him even knowing. I grabbed the invoices and ran. I didn't call. I drove the fund's utility van straight to Pier 7. I didn't care about security. I walked straight past them, my boots echoing on the oak floor, and burst into his office. He was on the phone but looked up, startled, as I entered. I slapped the manifest down on his desk. "The kitchen," I said, my voice shaking. "They're inside. The tin crown. They're using the fund." Rafe's eyes scanned the papers. He saw the logo. He dropped the phone without hanging up. The change in him was terrifying. It wasn't anger. It was an absolute freezing calm. He didn't just pale. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin taut over those sharp cheekbones. He understood instantly. This wasn't just smuggling. This was a political hit, designed to use his own legitimate charity to bring him down, painting him as the hypocrite who poisoned the very community he claimed to protect. He pressed a button on his intercom. His voice was lethal, quiet. "Lock down the accounts for Greystone Timber. Silent audit on every supplier for the fund. Effective immediately. Get a Maya Cruz in here. Now." He looked at me, his eyes black. "Where is Eli?" "He's at the new apartment, with the sitter you hired." "Go get him. Pack a bag, one bag. You're moving." "Moving, Rafe. I just moved You are not safe there," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "They know who you are. They know you're running this project. You're moving to the White Piling Estate. It's secure. I can't just..." "This is not a request. Mara." I went. The panic was back, acidic and familiar. I drove to the apartment, my hands slick on the wheel. The sitter was watching cartoons with Eli. I told her there was a gas leak, that we had to go. I threw Eli's nebulizer, his medicine, his favorite blanket, and that little red truck into a duffel bag. I told myself I was overreacting, that I just needed a few of my own things. I left Eli in the running van with the doors locked and sprinted up the 3 flights to my old dockside apartment. I just needed my design books and the framed photo of Eli from last summer. The door was open. It was splintered at the lock, kicked in. I froze, my heart in my throat. "Hello?" Silence, just the drip of the leaky faucet. I stepped inside. They hadn't taken the old television. They hadn't taken the microwave. They had been surgical. They'd gone to my room. My textbooks were shredded, the pages ripped out and thrown across the floor. And the picture, the framed photo of Eli, laughing on the swings. They had taken it from the wall, smashed the glass on the floor, and used a knife to slash the photo itself, cutting my son's smiling face into ribbons. I backed away, a scream trapped in my chest. This wasn't about smuggling. This wasn't about money. This was a message. We know what you love. I ran, stumbling down the stairs, and crashed into a solid chest at the bottom landing. It was Rafe. He grabbed my arms to steady me, his eyes immediately going past me, up the stairs to my violated apartment. He saw the splintered door. Mara, get in the car, now. I gasped, holding up the empty, broken frame I must have grabbed. They cut his face. Rafe looked at the broken frame in my hand. He looked at the terror in my eyes. He didn't say anything. He gently took the frame from me, his expression unreadable. He walked me to his own car, a black sedan I hadn't even seen, parked silently at the curb. He put me in the passenger seat and turned to the man who had driven him. Get the boy. Bring him here. As the man went to my van, Rafe walked back into my apartment building. He was gone for only a minute. When he got into the driver's seat, the air crackled with a pressure I had never experienced. He was holding the broken frame. He'd taken the time to go inside, pick up the ruined photo of Eli, and fit it back into the frame. He pulled a roll of black gaffer's tape from the glove box and, with precise, angry movements, taped the shattered glass back together, sealing the slashed image of my son inside. He placed the broken, taped-up frame on the dashboard. He started the car, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He looked straight ahead into the dark, misty street. They touched my family, he said, his voice barely a whisper, but louder than any gunshot. And I knew, as we drove away from the ruins of my old life, that he meant me. He meant Eli. The contract was sealed. The white piling estate wasn't an apartment, it was a fortress. It was a pre-war luxury building on a bluff overlooking the lake, retrofitted with security cameras and guards who looked like they'd stepped out of Rafe's office. It was clean, warm, and the windows didn't leak. It was the nicest prison I'd ever been in. Eli, however, loved it. He had his own room, a carpet that was soft, and the silence of the apartment meant his breathing was steadier. But the damp Port Greystone air was inescapable. One evening, I heard the dry, barking cough from his bedroom. I ran in, my own panic rising. He was sitting up in bed, his eyes wide, his small chest struggling. "It's okay, baby, it's okay. Mommy's got the machine." As I fumbled with the tubes of the nebulizer, my hands shaking, a shadow filled the doorway. It was Rafe. He'd been working in the study he'd claimed, but he was here, watching. I expected him to be annoyed by the noise, or awkward. Instead, he just walked past me, went to the hall closet, and pulled out a soft, cashmere scarf. He knelt by Eli's bed. "It's cold in your throat." "Right," he asked, his voice low and calm. Eli, struggling to nod, watched him. "When I was a kid," Rafe said, deftly folding the scarf, "my grandfather taught me this. You wrap it, like this, loose. See, it keeps the warm air from your chest close to your mouth. It makes the air you breathe in less of a shock." He wrapped the soft wool gently around Eli's neck. He didn't just dump it there. He adjusted it, making sure it was comfortable. His large, rough-looking hands moving with a surgeon's precision. "There," he said, "a warm pocket. Now, try breathing with me. In through the nose, slow. Out through the mouth, slower." I stood frozen, the plastic tubing in my hand. I was watching a man who controlled the city's shipping, a man whispered about in the same breath as murder, patiently teaching my son a breathing exercise. He was organized. He was gentle. He was, in that moment, more of a father than Travis had ever been. The kitchen inspection was the next day. The project was frozen, the site locked down. Rafe met me there, along with his lawyer, Amaya Cruz, a sharp woman who looked at everything like it owed her money. "Greystone timber and tile is a shell," Amaya said, tapping her tablet. "It exists only on paper. The FIC isn't just ignoring it, they're protecting it." "The wood," I said, walking toward the butcher blocks we'd installed. "If the company is fake, the product must be the tell." I knelt, using my designer's eye, looking at it not as a counter, but as an object, not just the top, but the sides, the bottom, where the contractors had stapled the shipping labels, and I saw it. Underneath the Greystone timber label was another, fainter barcode, one that had been partially scrubbed. I took out my phone and photographed it. Using the zoom, the numbers were almost invisible, but they were there. I handed the phone to Rafe. He looked at the image, his face hardening. He didn't need to consult anyone. He put his own phone to his ear. When he spoke, his voice was a razor. "It's me. Freeze all transactions and pending transfers related to Greystone, timber, and tile, all of them. And get me Harlan Stokes at the port registry. I want to know what ship brought this lumber in. Yes. Now." He hung up and looked at me. "You did well." Praise from him felt different. It felt heavy. The blowback came 24 hours later. Tin Crown didn't wait to be exposed. They attacked. A local news blog, one known for sensationalism, suddenly ran a headline, "Harbor Light Community Fund linked to money laundering scheme." The article was slick. It suggested Rafe was using his own charity, My Kitchen Project, to wash dirty money from illegal port activities. It was a lie, but it was a brilliant one, painting his philanthropy as a criminal enterprise. "Coincidentally," Amaya said, joining us in the estate study, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "the Fiscal Integrity Commission has just announced a full, immediate audit of the fund, citing the article. They're shutting us down." It was a political execution. The Heller brothers were trying to cut Rafe off at the knees, using the city's own bureaucracy. Rafe stood at the window, watching the rain. He was perfectly still. "They want an audit," he said quietly. "We'll give them one. Amaya, call the Community Safety Directorate, the CSD." Amaya paused. "The CSD, Rafe. They're the other side. They hate the FIC, but they hate you more. They're clean." "Exactly," Rafe said. "Invite them. Invite them to conduct their own parallel audit. Give them full access to the kitchen, the warehouse, every invoice. We're going to be so transparent, we'll blind them. Let the FIC try to bury the truth when the CSD is watching them do it." It was a terrifying gamble, pitting two city agencies against each other, with us in the middle. That night, I found him in the same study. The stress was eating me alive. "This is insane," I said, my voice tight. "I'm not built for this. Rafe, this isn't a design job. This is a war. They're using my work, my name, to attack you. They tore up my son's picture." He turned from the window. His face was shadowed, but his eyes were clear. "I know." "You have to get me out," I whispered. "This is too much." He stepped closer, and that intense, focused energy surrounded me. "If this goes 1 inch further than I can control," he said, his voice low and absolute, "I will personally drive you and Eli to the state line. I will set you up in a place where no one will ever find you. You have my word." I looked at him, at this impossible man, and I believed him. But I also knew he wasn't going to lose. "I don't want to run," I found myself saying. "I'm tired of running." "Good," he said. "Then we stay and we fight." The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, hitting the building with a crack of thunder so loud the lights flickered and died. The estate plunged into darkness. The only light was the faint, dying blue of the city over the water and the battery-powered backup lamps in the hall, casting long, spooky shadows. "The breaker," I muttered, more to myself. "It must be the main breaker." I found the panel in the utility closet. Fumbling with my phone's flashlight, it was an old, industrial-style box. I flipped the main, but nothing happened. "It's probably the fuse." Rafe's voice came from the darkness behind me. He was so quiet, I hadn't heard him approach. He took the phone from me, angling the light. "It's this one." He was standing close, too close. I could feel the heat radiating from his body in the cold hallway. He was trying to work the fuse, but the angle was awkward. "I can't get a grip on it," he said, his voice rough with frustration. "Let me," I said, "my hands are smaller." I moved in, standing in the space between him and the wall. Our arms brushed. I could smell the clean, iron scent of his skin, mixed with coffee, and the air was thick, charged with the storm outside and the proximity between us. My fingers found the small, cylindrical fuse. I tried to pull it, but it was stuck fast. Rafe put his hand over mine, his fingers engulfing my own. "Together," he breathed. He guided my hand, and the fuse popped free. My breath caught in my throat. His fingers were still laced with mine. His thumb resting on my pulse point, I could feel his heart, or maybe it was mine, hammering a rhythm against the roar of the rain. He didn't move. I didn't move. His other hand came up, the flashlight beam pointing away, leaving us in the intimate glow of the fire from the living room. His fingers touched my chin, tilting my face up. I saw the question in his eyes. He was the most dangerous man I'd ever met, and in that moment, I was not afraid of him. I was afraid of how much I wanted him to kiss me. He leaned in, slowly, his gaze dropping to my mouth. I felt my lips part, the world reduced to the inches between us, to the smell of him, to the heat. A cough. A small, dry cough from Eli's room, amplified by the silence. The moment shattered. It was like surfacing from deep water. I pulled my hand from his, stepping back so quickly I hit the wall. Eli. Rafe also stepped back, clearing his throat. The heat was gone, replaced by the cold, dark hallway. Right, the fuse. He took the spare from the box and slotted it in with a decisive click. The lights flickered on, harsh and white, blinding us both. "I'll check on him," I said, my voice sounding strained and foreign. I fled, my heart pounding, my face burning. I spent the next hour sitting by Eli's bed, watching him sleep. What was I doing? I was letting myself feel things for a man who lived in a world of violence and shadows, a man who, by his own admission, was a gangster. He offered protection, yes, but he was the danger. When I finally emerged, the apartment was quiet. Rafe was standing by the front door, his long coat on, his keys in his hand. He was leaving. He looked at me, his face an impassive mask. He had backed off, retreated completely. He was giving me the space I'd wordlessly asked for. "Good night, Mara," he said, his voice formal. He left. I locked the door, leaning against it, angry at myself, angry for wanting him, and angry for being relieved he was gone. My phone, lying on the entry table, buzzed. I picked it up, an unknown number. It wasn't a text. It was a video file. My finger, trembling, pressed play. It was grainy, black and white, surveillance footage. I saw myself, walking with that desperate, rain-soaked posture. I was walking into the steel and glass building at Pier 7. The timestamp was from the morning of my first meeting with Rafe. They had been watching me from the beginning. A new text came through from the same number. 5 words. "Be good or lose the boy." I sank to the floor, the phone clattering from my hand. They weren't just attacking Rafe, they were attacking me, using the one thing that would break me. I looked at the door Rafe had just walked through. I looked at the broken, taped-up picture of Eli I'd brought from the old apartment. I had been bowed down my whole life, to Sykes, to Travis, to the mold, the bills, the exhaustion. I stood up, my legs shaking, and picked up the phone. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to hide. I was done bowing down. I was going to fight. The video message, the threat against Eli, didn't just break me, it reset me. The fear that had defined my entire life, the constant low-level hum of anxiety, finally crystallized into something new. It became a cold, hard diamond of rage. I didn't delete the video. I walked into the study where Rafe was on the phone, his back to me, and I held my phone up. He saw the grainy footage reflected in the dark window, saw the text beneath it. He hung up the phone mid-sentence. "What do we do?" I asked. My voice wasn't shaking. He turned, his eyes sweeping over me, recognizing the change. The trembling, exhausted waitress was gone. "We take them apart," he said. He formed the war room in an hour. It wasn't just me and him. He brought in his inner circle. Amaya Cruz, the lawyer, returned, her laptop already open. A young man named Teo, with nervous energy, neon green headphones, and fingers that flew across a keyboard, setting up 3 monitors. He was, Rafe explained, the gray hat hacker who kept the port's digital infrastructure secure from interference. And then there was Harlan Stokes. Harlan looked like he'd been carved from the same ancient wood as the peers. He was an ex-port inspector, forced into early retirement by the Fiscal Integrity Commission for being too thorough. He knew every rivet, every shadow, every corrupt inspector in Port Greystone. "They are loyal to me," Mara Rafe said. "Not to them, but to me. Which means they are loyal to you." "The wood," I said, getting straight to it. "It's the key. The barcode I found." I put my phone on the main screen. Teo leaned in, his eyes scanning the pixels. "It's a ghost code," he murmured, typing furiously, masked but sloppy. "They're piggybacking the manifest from Greystone Timber onto a Tin Crown freight signature. They're moving two things at once. The wood is the cover." "They swapped the manifests at the Smoke Bay port," Harlan growled, his voice like gravel. "Bonded warehouse. 6B. It's a black hole. EFIC inspectors just stamp the paperwork at the gate. They never look inside." "And the trucks," Teo added. "They pull the cargo from 6B using untagged rigs. No plates, no GPS. They just vanish onto the interstate." Amaya, who had been listening intently, finally spoke. "This is our opening. The FIC audit on the fund is a political sham, but Rafe invited the Community Safety Directorate, the CSD, to run a parallel audit." I nodded, pitting them against each other. "Exactly," Amaya said. "The FIC only cares about the paper, but the CSD, they care about safety. If we could prove that the material in that warehouse, the wood itself, is hazardous, say, treated with a banned chemical, making it unfit for a food preparation surface." My mind finished the thought. "Then the CSD has to declare it a public health risk. They'll be forced to impound the entire shipment and investigate the supplier, Greystone Timber. It takes the focus off the fund and aims it straight at Tin Crown. It forces the FIC's hand." "It's a clean legal move," Rafe said, looking at Harlan. "But we need proof. We need a sample of that wood. We need footage from inside that warehouse." Harlan nodded slowly. "Smoke Bay is quiet at night. They run one guard on a 2-hour rotation. But the warehouse is locked down. Digital keypad, pressure sensors on the main floor. You can't walk in." Teo spoke up. "I can loop the security feed from the gate, but I can't bypass that keypad without logging an alert." I looked at the schematic Harlan had sketched on a whiteboard. I saw the layout, the sensor grid, the shelving units. My design brain clicked on. "You don't have to," I said. Everyone looked at me. "The sensors." I pointed. "They're laid in a grid, but not under the main structural shelving. They left a blind spot, a path about 2 feet wide, running the length of the building." "Too narrow to navigate in the dark," Harlan said. "Not if you know the layout," I countered. "But the lock is the first problem." I looked at the spec sheet Teo had pulled up. It's a standard magnetic lock, but the junction box is internal. We can't cut the power. I thought about the sticky drawers in my old apartment, the jammed locks I used to have to fix. "Harlan, what's the gap under the door?" "Standard 1/2 inch?" "I need a flexible steel ruler, a thin one, like a measuring tape refill, and a strong, rare earth magnet." Rafe looked at me, a flicker of something surprise, respect in his eyes. "Teo, you and Harlan go with her. Get the sample. Get the footage. And you," I asked. "I'll be the distraction in case you fail." Smoke Bay Port was a graveyard of rust. The fog was so thick it muffled our footsteps. Harlan cut the fence with a quiet snap of bolt cutters. Teo, burdened with a backpack of gear, moved like a shadow. I was shaking, but it wasn't from cold. We reached warehouse 6B. Teo confirmed the camera feed was looping. Harlan stood guard. I knelt at the massive metal door. "This is insane," I whispered, feeding the thin steel ruler into the dark gap. "This is Tuesday," Harlan grunted. I slid the ruler in until I felt it hit the internal latch mechanism. I attached the magnet to the outside of the door, right where the latch should be, using it to hold the ruler in place. I took a breath. I pulled hard. The ruler bowed, then a solid, heavy thunk. The magnetic lock disengaged. I eased the door open. We were in. It was pitch black. Teo put on night vision goggles. "Okay," he whispered. "I see the path. Follow my footsteps exactly. Do not step off the shelving line." We moved through the cavernous space, stacked high with crates. I could smell it before I saw it, a sharp, acrid scent, like ammonia and burnt plastic. There, I pointed, the graystone timber crates. Teo began filming, his camera sweeping the room, capturing the stacks of tin crown containers hidden behind the wood. I pulled a drill from Teo's bag and took 3 core samples from the butcher blocks, sealing them in evidence bags. The smell was overwhelming. "We got it," Teo said. "Let's go." A slow, amplified clap echoed from the loading bay doors. We froze. The massive bay doors rolled up, flooding the warehouse with harsh floodlights. Wyatt Heller stood there, silhouetted. He was wearing a grin that belonged on a coyote just before the kill. He wasn't alone. He had at least 6 men with him. "Well, now," Wyatt's voice boomed, "I heard Calderon had a new girl, but I didn't think he'd have her doing his wet work. I'm disappointed. Mara." He knew my name. The blood drained from my face. "Rafe can't protect you here. This isn't his pier. His little monopoly on this lake. It's over." His men fanned out, and I saw the weapons. They weren't just handguns. They were carrying tactical shotguns. Teo was still filming, his hands shaking so badly the camera was visibly vibrating. "Give me the samples, sweetheart," Wyatt smiled. "And the hacker, we can let the old man go." "Go to hell, Heller," Harlan spat. Wyatt just shrugged. "Fine." He raised his hand. Headlights sliced through the fog behind Wyatt, a black sedan, followed by 2 more, sliding to a stop, perfectly blocking the loading bay exit. Rafe stepped out of the center car. He was alone, his long coat hanging open. His men, 4 of them, flanked the cars, creating a perfect kill box. It was a standoff. "Wyatt," Rafe's voice was calm, conversational, but it cut through the huge space. "You're trespassing." "I'm just picking up my property," Wyatt sneered, starting with her. He pointed at me. I saw Wyatt's man on the right shift his shotgun, aiming not at Rafe, but at the car door. He was aiming for the driver. They were going to shoot. This was it. I looked to my left. Teo was still filming, capturing the whole standoff. I saw the wall. I saw the bright red, old-fashioned fire alarm pull station. This couldn't be a firefight. Rafe had to be clean, the CSD. I saw Wyatt's man brace his weapon. "Don't!" I screamed, and I ran, not away, but sideways. I lunged for the wall and slammed my hand down on the alarm. A deafening clanging filled the warehouse. A split second later, the overhead sprinklers exploded. A deluge of icy, foul-smelling water crashed down. Everyone yelled. The floodlights shattered. Wyatt's men, blinded and soaked, panicked, raising their weapons instinctively as the water hit them. Teo's night vision camera caught it all. Tin crown, weapons up, aimed to fire, while Rafe and his men hadn't even moved. Harlan Rafe's voice cut through the alarm. "Get them out side door now." Harlan grabbed me by the jacket and shoved me toward an exit I hadn't seen. Teo was right behind me. We burst out into the rain, piling into a dark car that was waiting, its engine already running. We sped away as the sounds of shouting, but no gunshots faded behind us. We were soaked, shaking but alive. The next morning, Amaya laid it all out. The CSD, acting on an anonymous tip, had raided Warehouse 6B. They found the wood, they found the chemicals. They had Teo's footage clear as day, showing Wyatt Heller's armed men illegally occupying the warehouse, guarding a public toxin. The Greystone Timber and Tile warehouse was sealed, its assets frozen. The FIC was forced to backtrack, publicly announcing an investigation into Tin Crown's shipping practices. We had won. We had flipped the script. I was in the kitchen at the estate, finally breathing, watching Eli play with his red truck. Rafe walked in. Not in a suit, but a simple t-shirt, and he looked tired. "You were good," he said quietly. "You saw the move. You won the game." "We won," I said, looking down. "Mara?" I looked up. His face was dark again, his eyes holding that familiar coldness. He was holding his phone out to me. They made their countermove. He said. I looked at the screen. It was the same sleazy news blog. The headline hit me like a physical blow. Worried father speaks out, Mara Quinn's exclaims mafia boss holding son hostage. I read the first line. Travis Pike, the estranged father of Mara Quinn's 4-year-old son, has come forward, claiming he's deeply concerned. It was full of lies, vicious, twisted lies, painting me as an unstable addict, Rafe as a monster, and Travis as the valiant father. And the implications were clear. Travis was selling information about me, about Eli, to Tin Crown, all under the guise of saving his son. They hadn't just found my apartment, they had found my past, and they had turned the father of my child into a weapon pointed directly at my heart. It was inevitable. The fake news story was just the appetizer. The intercom at the White Piling estate buzzed, a harsh, angry sound that cut through the quiet of the apartment. Eli was in his room, finally asleep. The guard's voice was tight. Mr. Calderon, ma'am, we have a situation at the front gate. Rafe was at my side in an instant. He switched on the security monitor. My stomach plummeted to the floor. It was Travis. He was drunk, clinging to the iron bars, his face contorted in a mask of booze-fueled rage. He was shouting, but we couldn't hear him through the glass. He looked pathetic and terrifying, a ghost from a life I'd almost escaped. I instinctively moved in front of the monitor, as if I could shield Eli from the image through the walls. Rafe's hand went to his phone. I watched, my heart hammering, expecting him to make the call, the one where men in dark cars arrive and a problem disappears. Who are you calling? I whispered. Security, he said, his eyes fixed on the screen. To do what? To call the CSD, the Community Safety Directorate. He glanced at me, his gaze cool. We'll file a formal disturbance report. He's intoxicated, he's on private property, and he's harassing the mother of a minor. It's the correct child protection procedure. I stared at him. No violence, no dark alley. He was using the system. He was building a legal wall around us, brick by brick. He was doing this by the book, the one weapon Tin Crown couldn't fight. He looked at me, his face softening just a fraction. He's your past. Mara. He's afraid of me. He's not afraid of you. Do you want to handle this? A year ago, I would have hidden in the bathroom. 6 months ago, I would have cried. Yes, I said. I pressed the intercom button. Rafe stepped back, crossing his arms, a silent, solid presence at my shoulder. Travis. My voice, amplified by the external speaker, boomed into the night. He froze, squinting up at the camera he hadn't realized was there. Mara, baby, let me in. They got you trapped in there. I know it, that bastard Calderon. He has my son. The old, familiar rage flared in my chest. He is my son, Travis. He's not yours. I got rights. He's my blood. You have no rights, I said, and the words felt like iron. You haven't paid $1 of child support in 14 months. You haven't seen him since last winter. You sold my name to a gutter press for drinking money. You forfeited your rights when you chose them over us. If you want to see Eli, you will get sober, you will get a lawyer, and you will file for supervised visitation. Until then, stay away from my home. He stared at the speaker, his drunken bravado collapsing into slack-jawed confusion. This was not the Mara he knew. Mara, they're twisting you. The police are on their way. Go home, Travis. I cut the connection. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely pull it from the console, but I was standing. I was breathing. Rafe was watching me, not the screen. His expression was impossible to read, but his eyes were dark with an intensity that felt like approval. He just nodded, once. He won't get past the gate, he said. The adrenaline held me for hours. It held me while the CSD came and went, while I filed the report, and while I checked on Eli, brushing the hair from his forehead as he slept. Then, the adrenaline was gone. I was in the kitchen, staring out the window at the black, churning lake, the weight of it, all the warehouse, the threat, the video, and now Travis, clawing his way back into my life. It all crashed down on me at once. My knees gave out, I didn't faint, I just folded, sinking onto a low stool, my head dropping into my hands, and for the first time, not in fear, but in sheer, crushing exhaustion, I began to cry. They were not the quiet, stinging tears of the diner. They were ugly, silent, wrenching sobs that tore at my throat. I cried for the mess, for the fact that my son's father was a tool used by my enemies, for the terrifying, impossible man in the next room who was the only thing keeping us safe. I didn't hear him come in. The floors were too thick, and he moved too quietly. I just smelled it, the scent of dark chocolate and warm milk. A steaming mug slid onto the granite countertop in front of me. Hot cocoa, rich and dark. Rafe stood beside me, not speaking. He looked intensely awkward, a man built for boardrooms and back alleys, completely out of his depth with a crying woman. Then he did something that surprised me. He didn't pat my shoulder. He didn't offer empty words. He placed one large, warm hand flat on my back, right between my shoulder blades. It wasn't a comforting pat, it was an anchor, a point of stability. The heat from his palm soaked through my thin sweater, solid and real. "Breathe," he commanded, his voice the same low, smooth tone he'd used in the diner. "The panic is in your chest. You have to let it out, or it will choke you." "I can't," I gasped, a sob catching in my throat. "It's too much. Rafe, they won't stop. They're using him." "Yes, they will," he said, "but not tonight. Tonight, you just breathe." His hand was so warm, a solid weight that kept me from flying apart. Match my breathing. In. He took a slow, audible breath. I tried to copy him. My own breath hitched, a complete failure. "Again," he ordered, his hand pressing just slightly. "In. Hold it. Now out, slower than you want to." We did this. 3 times. 4. My ragged gasps slowly, painfully began to even out. The shaking in my shoulders subsided. The storm inside me was still raging, but his hand was an anchor, holding me steady in the waves. I finally lifted my head, wiping my face. I looked up at him. He was watching me, and the mask of the boss was gone. His dark eyes were unguarded, and I saw the exhaustion in them, the same bone-deep weariness I felt. I wasn't just his project. He wasn't just my protector. We were 2 people in a fortress, with an army at the gates. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice raw. "I'm here, Mara." My hand was on the counter. His was still on my back. I didn't want him to move. I didn't want to be alone, not even for a second. The space between us was electric, charged not with the near miss in the hallway, but with a deep, shared understanding. I made the choice. I leaned in, closing the small distance between us, and pressed my lips to his. It was slow, exploratory. My mouth was still damp with tears, and his lips were firm and dry. He froze. For one long, agonizing heartbeat, he remained perfectly still, a statue of controlled power. Then, he exhaled, a low sound from deep in his chest. His mouth responded. He didn't kiss me back, he answered me. His hand moved from my back, sliding up to cup the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair, holding me steady as he tilted his head. His other arm came around my waist, and with that same effortless, impossible strength, he lifted me from the stool, pulling me up and against his body. My feet left the floor. I wrapped my legs around his waist, my hands clinging to his shoulders. The kiss deepened, becoming starved, a release of every ounce of pressure, fear, and rage I'd held inside. It was a kiss that said, "I am still here. I am still fighting." He tasted of coffee and the clean, iron scent of the lake. His body was solid and warm, a bulkhead against the storm. He moved, walking us from the kitchen, never breaking the kiss. We ended up in the living room, in front of the massive, floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the black, churning water of the harbor. He set me down, letting me slide slowly down his body until my feet touched the floor. But he didn't release me. He kept me pinned between him and the glass, his hands framing my face, his forehead resting against mine. We were both breathing hard, the glass fogging behind me. "You're safe," he whispered, the words a vow against my skin. "Stay with me," I whispered back. It wasn't a question. It was a plea. He pulled back, just enough to look me in the eyes. His were black with a desire that matched my own, but they were also clear. That damnable, constant control was still there. "Mara," he said, his voice rough, "are you sure?" He was giving me an out. The gentleman, the gangster, the man who would sign in blood. He was letting me choose. I didn't trust my voice to work. I just looked straight into his eyes and nodded. Once. That was all he needed. The kiss that followed was different. It wasn't the desperate crash of before. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was a promise being sealed. My thin cardigan slid from my shoulders, forgotten, pooling on the floor. His fingers went to the top button of my shirt, his knuckles brushing the skin of my collarbone, and the contact sent a shiver through my entire body. He was slow, so slow. I saw a small, almost shy smile touch his lips as my fumbling hands gripped the hem of his shirt, pulling it free. He lifted me again, and this time, we moved away from the window. The heavy curtains, stirred by the draft from the lake, swayed gently, obscuring the view. The only sounds in the world were the rhythmic, distant crash of the waves on the pier, far below, and the quiet, steady harmony of our breathing, finally in sync. I woke to the pale, flat light of a Port Greystone dawn. The storm had passed. For a second, I was disoriented. The sheets were softer. The air was warmer. Then I felt it, a heavy warmth across my waist. I was on my side, and Rafe was spooned behind me, his arm draped protectively over my hips. We were still holding hands, our fingers laced together in our sleep. I lay perfectly still, listening. The apartment was silent, except for the sound of Eli coughing once in his room, a small, dry sound. Before he settled back into sleep, he was safe. I was safe. I turned, slowly, carefully, in the circle of Rafe's arm. He was awake. His eyes were open, watching me. The shadows of the night were gone, leaving his gaze clear and, for the first time, completely unguarded. Neither of us spoke. There were no words for what had happened, for what it meant. It wasn't an escape. It was an anchoring. He lifted his free hand, his rough fingers brushing the hair from my face. A smile, small and real, touched my lips. His stomach growled, a low, demanding sound that was shockingly human. It broke the spell. A laugh escaped me. It was a rusty, quiet sound, but it was real. The first one in months. He blinked, surprised by the sound, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his own face. "I'm not," he admitted, his voice rough with sleep, "a breakfast person." A little later, I was in the kitchen, sipping real coffee. Eli was in the living room, watching cartoons, his red truck in his hand. Rafe was at the stove. I watched, amused, as the boss of the harbor stared at a carton of eggs with the same intense, frowning concentration he used on a shipping manifest. I was delighted to discover a terrible cook. He scraped the slightly browned, overcooked eggs onto a plate. Next to 2 pieces of blackened toast, he set it in front of me with a look of profound seriousness. I looked at the disastrous plate. I looked at him, and I laughed again. A real, full laugh this time. He watched me for a second, then joined in, a low chuckle that warmed the whole room. We ate the terrible breakfast together. The war was still outside. Travis was still a weapon. Tin Crown was still a threat. But something fundamental had changed. I was no longer his ward. He was no longer just my protector. We were partners. I looked at him, at the man who had taped my son's broken photo, who had held me while I cried, who had made me burn eggs. "They think we're on the defensive," I said quietly. He stopped, his coffee mug halfway to his lips, and looked at me, waiting. "We're not," I continued, feeling that new, hard resolve setting in my bones. "We're not just going to react. We're not just going to protect the fund." A slow, dangerous smile returned to his face. He knew exactly what I meant. "We're going to change the rules of the game. We didn't wait for them to move. We moved first." Amaya Cruz, armed with the CSD's preliminary and still unreleased toxicology reports on the wood samples, filed a sweeping civil suit in Greystone Intercounty Court. It wasn't against Tin Crown, it was against the Fiscal Integrity Commission. She wasn't alleging criminality. She was alleging gross negligence and demanding full transparency of their inspection processes, citing the imminent public health risk they had ignored. It was a masterful legal stroke. It forced the FIC to defend themselves in open court, and it dragged the name Tin Crown into official legal filings. The local media, which had been feasting on the Travis Pike story, suddenly had a much bigger, more complex scandal to chase. For the first time, reporters started asking why the FIC was so protective of a shell company like Greystone Timber and Tile. While the FIC was busy drafting legal responses, Rafe launched his own offensive. He didn't just counter the bad press, he rewrote the narrative. He held a press conference not at Pier 7, but on the steps of the half-finished Community Kitchen No. 1. He announced the expansion of the fund. It will no longer be just a kitchen, he declared, his voice calm and authoritative, resonating in the cold morning air. We are launching the Lake Meal Network, a chain of free, safe, and transparent community kitchens. Then came the master stroke, and to ensure the safety our city agencies have failed to guarantee, every kitchen in our network, starting today, will be retrofitted with material source sensors. Every piece of wood, every sheet of steel, every delivery will be tracked, its origins encrypted and logged on a public blockchain designed by my head of digital security. Teo, standing beside him in a clean suit, nodded awkwardly at the cameras. It was brilliant. Rafe had taken their accusation of him being a criminal and turned it around, positioning himself as the only trustworthy source of public safety. He was making transparency his brand, making his operation so public that it was impossible to suspect. My part in this new war was quieter, but just as vital. With the primary kitchen site now a CSD crime scene, I moved my focus to kitchen No. 3 in the old cannery district. We had volunteers now, locals who had heard about the fund and wanted to help. Eli was with me, and he was breathing better, and the secure, stable environment had brought him out of his shell. He sat at a small table, drawing pictures of his red truck, while I directed a team painting the walls a warm, clean white. A local blogger, one who wasn't on Tin Crown's payroll, was there doing a human interest story. She watched as I stopped my work, went to Eli, and crouched beside him. "Okay, buddy, time to wash hands. We have to be clean in the kitchen," I said. He was small, and the industrial sink was high. I lifted him, balancing him on my hip as I turned on the water, my hands covering his as I worked the soap. "Between the fingers," I murmured, "and the backs. Gotta get all the germs." He giggled as the soap bubbled, the blogger's camera flashed. The next day, that picture was everywhere. It was the face of the Lake Meal Network, not Rafe Calderon, the shadowy boss, but me, Mara Quinn, the single mother who had survived, holding her son. I was the story. I was the proof that the fund was about family, about safety. We had, without intending to, built a public firewall of goodwill. Tin Crown, however, was not impressed. They were a cornered animal, and that's when they became most dangerous. The toxicology reports from the CSD, the ones that would prove the wood was poisoned, were suddenly delayed. "A commissioner," Amaya reported, her voice tight with fury during our evening meeting. "A CSD commissioner named Jovich. He's citing procedural errors in the chain of custody. He's burying the evidence." "He's not just burying it," Rafe said, looking at Teo. "He's been paid to—" Teo was already working. "Jovich has a mortgage that's 3 times his salary. He just paid off a $20,000 boat loan, in cash." "Find the source," Rafe ordered. Teo's fingers flew. "It's not direct. It's a wash. The money came from an offshore account, routed through a small industrial bank in the factory district. The account is—" "Oh, that's interesting. The account is registered to a holding company owned by Wyatt and Boone Heller, Rafe finished. Oh, he didn't sound surprised. He sounded vindicated. We can't use it, Amaya warned. It's illegally obtained information. We don't need to use it in court, Rafe said. We just need to know who to watch. While Teo tracked the money, Harlan Stokes had been tracking the product. He and Teo had been mapping the entire Tin Crown logistics chain. Harlan spread a massive satellite map of the Greystone rail network on the dining table. Here, Harlan said, his thick finger tapping a thin, rusted-looking bridge, the Golden Long Trestle. It spans the Greystone Canal. It's the one spot where the main rail line comes within 100 yards of the water before the official port RFID scanning terminus. Teo pointed. The train slowed down to cross the trestle. The FIC scanners are 2 miles down the track. Right here, his own finger tapped the map, is a digital blind spot. They're offloading the high-value contraband, the untaxed, the illegal at the bridge, straight onto canal barges. They never even reach the port scans. They're bypassing my water, my rail, and my scanners, Rafe said, his voice a low growl. It's a perfect setup. Harlan nodded. They'll be moving their next big shipment before the CSD case gets any traction. They have to. Then we hit them there, Rafe said. We hit them at the trestle. We take the shipment. No, I said that. The room went silent. All three of them, Rafe, Amaya, Harlan looked at me. The old Mara would have shrunk. The new Mara leaned forward. You can't, I said, looking straight at Rafe. An ambush, a firefight on a bridge. That's exactly what they want. They're baiting you. You'll be the criminal you just told the city you aren't. We'll lose everything, the kitchens, the media, the moral high ground. So we let them go, Harlan growled. No, I said. We don't ambush them. We expose them. We don't hit their supply. We hit their distribution. We prove what they're bringing in. Rafe watched me, his expression unreadable, but he was listening. We create a bait shipment, I said, the idea forming, as I spoke, a clean one. We route it through their blind spot, but we make it look like a high-value score. We pack a container with something they would think is valuable but is actually traceable and sympathetic. Sympathetic, Amaya asked. Textbooks, I said, baby formula, diapers, things for the community, and we rig it. Teo, can you rig it? Teo's eyes lit up. Sensors GPS, of course. Not just GPS, I said, remembering a forensic show I'd seen. Tiny, passive fingerprint tracking sensors, the kind that dust a hand with traceable, invisible particles when a seal is broken. We don't just track the box. We track the hands that open it. We track it all the way to the buyers. It was a clean op. It was a legal one. We would track the stolen shipment and then anonymously tip off the clean CSD team, the ones not on Jovich's payroll, not just to the location, but to the entire distribution network. Rafe looked at me for a long, silent moment. Then he smiled. It was a slow, dangerous, and incredibly proud smile. Do it, he said. Amaya, set up the legal shield. Harlan, prep the container. Teo, make it invisible. Mara, you run this. In the midst of this strategic storm, a piece of my old life washed up. I was at kitchen number 3, supervising the installation of the new ventilation hoods. A man was at the gate, talking to the security guard Rafe had assigned me. It was Travis. He wasn't drunk. He was thin. His hands were shaking, and his eyes were clear for the first time in years. He looked awful. He looked sober. I walked to the gate. He flinched when he saw me, like he expected me to yell. Mara, he said, his voice cracking. I saw the news. About the kitchens. About you. What do you want, Travis? They paid me. Mara, he whispered, looking at the ground, the Tin Crown bastards. They gave me $500 to say that stuff. I was dry. I needed it. But I saw the picture of you and Eli. In the kitchen, I saw what you're building. He looked up, and I saw the desperate, hollow shame in his eyes. I just want a job. Mara, a real one. I can sweep. I can lift. I'm strong. I don't want their money anymore. I want to be somewhere. Good. I want Eli to know I did one good thing. I looked at him. The man who had abandoned me. The man who had sold me out. The man who was, despite it all, my son's father. "You report to Harlan," I said, my voice flat. "You'll be on probation. You'll be supervised at all times. You will not approach my son. You will not speak to me unless it is about work. You will be drug tested every morning. You fail once, you're gone." "Understood." Tears welled in his eyes. "Understood. Thank you, Mara, thank you." I walked away before he could say more. That night, Rafe and I stood by the window, watching the rain begin to fall again. "You saw Travis today," he said. It wasn't a question. I gave him a job, sweeping floors. Rafe was quiet for a moment. I would have crushed him. "I know," I said. "That's why I'm not you." He turned, his hand finding mine in the darkness. He lifted it to his lips, kissing my knuckles. "No," he said, his voice low. You're better. Your compassion is a principle. It's not a weakness." He held my hand, and we watched the rain across the city. Teo's sensors were being loaded onto a train. The night of the shipment was a torrent. The rain came down in sheets, turning the rail yards into a river of mud. We were in a mobile command center, a black van packed with Teo's monitors parked on a bluff overlooking the golden long trestle. "The train is approaching the trestle," Teo reported, his voice tight. "The bait container is secure. I'm pinging the clean CSD unit. They're 5 minutes out, ready to move in on our signal." On one screen, I saw the heat signature of the train. On another, I saw the GPS icons of the CSD team. It was working. "Wait," Harlan said, his binoculars pressed to the window. "Wait." Down on the canal road, under the trestle. Teo switched cameras. My blood ran cold. There were 3 trucks, untagged, no plates, and a dozen men, fanning out in the rain, taking up positions. "They're not just picking up the shipment," Rafe said, his voice a deadly calm. "They're waiting for it. They knew. Commissioner Yovich, the bribe, it wasn't just to delay the reports. It was to get our plans." "They're not just here for the container," I whispered, staring at the screen. "It's an ambush." "And the CSD is driving right into it," Rafe said. He looked at Teo. "Signal them abort now." "I can't," Teo said, his face pale. "They've gone dark. They're on radio silence for the approach." On the screen, the train's lights cut through the rain, and the flashing blue lights of the CSD squad cars appeared at the far end of the road. They were all converging on the trestle at the same time. And Tin Crown was waiting for them. The world on Teo's monitors dissolved into chaos. "They're trapped," Teo whispered, his face pale in the monitor glow. "The clean CSD unit is driving straight into them. Yovich is stalling. I can hear him on their comms, ordering them to hold position." On the screen, Wyatt Heller's men fanned out, their heavy trucks blocking the bridge. The train screeched, metal on metal, grinding to a halt. The CSD cruisers, lights flashing, were caught in the open. It was a slaughter waiting to happen. Rafe didn't hesitate. He grabbed his comm piece, his voice a blade of ice. "All Harbor Light units, hold, I repeat, hold your positions. Do not engage. We are defensive only. We do not fire first." He was sacrificing his tactical advantage to protect the narrative, to protect me and the fund. "Stay in the van, lock the doors," he ordered, and before I could argue, he opened the door and stepped out into the deluge. "Rafe!" No, I lunged for him, but he was already gone, a dark figure walking calmly into the floodlights, hands empty, coat flapping in the wind. He was walking straight toward Wyatt. "He's insane," Harlan growled, his binoculars fixed on the scene. "He's making himself a target." I watched, my heart lodged in my throat. On the monitor, Teo had trained on the 2 bosses. Rafe stopped, a good 20 yards from Wyatt. He was talking. He was offering terms. He was giving Wyatt Heller a choice. Even now, I could almost hear his voice, cold and final, offering the law or the lake. "Damn it," Harlan hissed, swiveling his binoculars to the far side of the canal. "I've got movement. Up on the canal locks. High ground. It's Boone. He's got a rifle." "I can't see him," Teo said, frantically trying to find him with the cameras. "The angle is wrong, the rain." My eyes snapped back to the main monitor, back to Rafe. And I saw it. A tiny, vibrating pinprick of crimson light dancing on the wet black wool of Rafe's coat. It was coming from the locks. It was moving from his shoulder, down, settling right over his heart. A laser sight. I didn't think my body moved. I was out of the van, my feet sliding on the wet gravel. The rain was an icy sheet, blinding me. I screamed his name, a sound ripped out of me by the wind. He turned, his face a mask of shock at seeing me. I didn't stop. I launched myself through the air, my only thought to get him out of the red light. I hit him with my entire body weight, down. We crashed backward, a tangle of limbs, sliding on the mud and gravel. We slammed hard into the massive steel I-beam of the bridge trestle. A sound like a high-velocity whip crack split the air. Ping. A spray of hot metal and concrete fragments exploded from the pillar, precisely where Rafe's chest had been 1 second before. Pain seared along my arm as a piece of shrapnel grazed me. Mara Rafe's voice was a roar of fury. He was rolling, pulling me under him, shielding me with his own body as he fumbled for a weapon he'd refused to carry. "Your arm," he grunted, seeing the blood. "It's nothing," I gasped. "He's still there. The sniper." But another sound was cutting through the night. Back in the van, Teo had slammed his fist on his keyboard. "Signal active," his voice yelled, not from the van, but from the comm piece Rafe had dropped, which I now had in my hand. The world went insane. Every streetlight on the bridge, every lamppost along the canal road, suddenly began to flash. It wasn't random. It was a frantic, blinking rhythm. ... dash, dash, dash. ... "SOS? It's Amaya's backup," Teo's voice crackled in my ear. "A secondary CSD unit, a clean one, staged 2 miles out. They were waiting for a panic signal if Jovic tried to block the primary team. At the same time, Harlan, using the chaos as cover, had moved like a ghost. He'd slipped between the cars of the stopped train. We heard a heavy, metallic clang, a sound of disengagement. The bait container, the one with our sensors, our evidence, and our cameras, shuddered. It uncoupled from the train and began to roll, slowly, silently, away from the standoff, coasting down the slight gradient, its internal cameras recording the entire scene of Tin Crown's ambush. The firefight had been averted, but the chaos was total. Then, a new, private terror. My phone, shoved deep in my jacket pocket, began to buzz, a frantic, vibrating buzz. I pulled it out, my hands shaking, shielding the screen from the rain. It was a text from the sitter. "Mara, Eli coughing, bad, wheezing, can't reach you." My blood ran cold. My son was choking, and I was pinned under a bridge in a mafia standoff. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't be there. "He's having an attack. I'm scared. I don't know what to do." "Rafe," I gasped, clutching his arm. "Eli." Before I could finish, a new message came through, a photo. It was Eli, and he was in his bed, the portable nebulizer mask held to his face. His eyes were wide and scared, but he was breathing the albuterol. And the hand holding the mask, steadying it, was not the sitter's. It was large, rough, and familiar. A second text followed, from Travis. "I got him. I was at the kitchen. Sitter called me. Hysterical. I ran. Nurse is on the phone with me. He's stabilizing. His breathing is getting better. I got him. Mara, I'm not leaving him." A sob, hot and sharp, mixed with the cold rain on my face. It was a moment of impossible redemption. While I was on a bridge saving the man who had become my world, the man from my past was at home, saving my son. 2 families, one of crime, one of blood, braided together in the storm. "He's okay," I whispered to Rafe. Travis has him. He's okay." The sound of new sirens cut through the air. Not just a few, a fleet. Amaya's secondary unit, the clean one, roared in from the north end of the canal road, trapping Tin Crown's forces in a pincer. "CSD, drop your weapons. Drop them now." Commissioner Jovic, his betrayal obvious, was screaming into his radio, but no one was listening. The clean team, seeing Boone Heller's sniper nest and Wyatt's heavily armed men, moved in hard and fast. They tackled Boone before he could get a second shot off, dragging him from the locks. It was over. Wyatt Heller saw it. He wasn't going to be taken. He shoved one of his own men into the path of a CSD officer and made a sprint for the trestle railing. He vaulted over it, a desperate, animalistic leap, and disappeared into the black, churning water of the canal below. Rafe was on his feet in an instant. I saw the blood on his arm, a dark stain spreading down his sleeve where the bullet had grazed him. He didn't notice. He was staring at the spot where Wyatt had vanished. That cold, lake-bottom look was back in his eyes. He was going in after him. No, I scrambled to my feet, grabbing his good arm. Rafe, let him go. He doesn't get away, he snarled, trying to shake me off. Look at me, I pulled, forcing him to turn. He's gone. This is what they want. They want to drag you into the mud with them. Don't let them... We have Boone. We have the bait car. We have the evidence. We have Jovic in cuffs. We won. Don't lose it all by becoming him. He stared at me, his chest heaving, the rain plastering his hair to his face. The rage in his eyes was at war with the logic. He looked at his bleeding arm, then at me, then at the flashing blue and red lights that had completely surrounded us. He took a long, shuddering breath. The killer receded. He nodded. Once. It was finished. Or so I thought. We were in the back of the van an hour later, wrapped in thermal blankets, watching the CSD secure the scene. Harlan gave me a gruff nod. Good work. Mara. But Teo, at his monitors, looked sick. Rafe, he said, his voice hollow. We have a problem. He turned one of his screens toward us. It was the sleazy news blog, already updated. A new headline was blaring across the top, posted less than 10 minutes ago. Mafia war on Golden Long Trestle, Calderon's thugs ambush city officers in failed heist. They had released their own video, doctored footage, grainy cell phone clips, probably from Jovic's men, edited together with our own hacked security feeds. It showed Rafe's men in the shadows. It showed me, wild-eyed, tackling Rafe, making it look like I was part of a firefight. It showed the CSD cars arriving after the conflict had begun. They had framed the entire ambush to look like we were the ones attacking the CA. Wyatt hadn't just escaped. He had fired his last, most vicious shot. Tin Crown was broken, but the final, public battle was just beginning. The war wasn't over. It had just moved to a new battlefield, the courtroom. The courtroom felt like the bottom of the lake, cold, silent, and crushing. The air in the Greystone Inter-County Courthouse was heavy, smelling of old wood polish and collective anxiety. The case was the state versus Rafael Calderon. The charges were a laundry list of organized crime, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit violence against city officers. I sat behind the defense table next to Amaya. Rafe sat on her other side, perfectly still. He wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit, his face an unreadable mask of calm. He looked less like a defendant and more like a king observing a tedious foreign ritual. The prosecutor, a sharp man named Dunn, was pacing in front of the jury, his voice ringing with righteous indignation. We have the video, he boomed, and the grainy, doctored footage from the news blog filled the monitors. We see the defendant's men lurking in the shadows. We see the firefight they initiated, and we have the testimony of a hero. He called Commissioner Jovic to the stand. Jovic, looking pale and sweating in his dress uniform, proceeded to lie. He claimed his primary unit was performing a routine check on the trestle when they were ambushed by Calderon's private army. He painted himself as a victim, Rafe as the aggressor. Then it was Amaya's turn. She didn't attack Jovic. She dismantled him. She was surgical. Commissioner Jovic, she began, her voice quiet but carrying. Are you familiar with the Industrial District Bank of Greystone? Jovic paled. I may have an account there. An account, Amaya said. projecting bank statements onto the screen that received 3 separate wire transfers, totaling $50,000, from a holding company registered in the Caymans A Holding Company. We can prove that is wholly owned by Wyatt and Boone Heller. Dunn objected. The judge overruled him. The jury stared at Jovich, who was now visibly wilting. Amaya didn't stop. She brought Teo, who verified the money trail. She brought Harlan, who verified the shipping manifests for the bait car. She introduced the CSD's own toxicology reports on the poisoned wood from Warehouse 6B. She was not just defending Rafe, she was prosecuting Tin Crown in absentia, establishing a clear, undeniable pattern of corruption that began with the FIC and ended with Jovich. Then, she said, the defense calls Mara Quinn to the stand. My heart stopped. This was it. I walked on trembling legs, my cheap heels echoing on the wooden floor. I sat, my hands clenched so tightly my knuckles were white. Amaya was gentle. Miss Quinn, can you please tell the court, in your own words, how you came to be employed by Mr. Calderon? I looked at the jury. 12 ordinary people. It started when I collapsed, I said, my voice shaking. I was working a triple shift at the Gull and Anchor Diner. I was exhausted, and I fell. Mr. Calderon was there. He caught me. I told them everything. The job offer, the kitchen design, the insurance that paid for Eli's nebulizer. I told them about the Tin Crown logo on the wood, the threat, and the night my apartment was destroyed. I held up the evidence bag containing the slashed, taped-together photo of my son. The prosecution claims Mr. Calderon is a criminal, I said, my voice gaining strength. I'm not naive. I know he is a dangerous man. But when my home was violated, he didn't send men with guns. He showed up himself. He taped my son's picture back together. When we were at the warehouse, he ordered his men to hold their fire. When we were at the bridge, he walked out unarmed to prevent violence. He has protected my son. He has protected me. And he is protecting the kitchens that feed this city. He's not the monster in this story. I finished, my chest heaving. The courtroom was silent. Prosecutor Dunn stood, a predatory smile on his face, a very moving story. Miss Quinn, a tale of a knight in shining armor. But let's talk about the real nature of your arrangement. He clicked a button. A new image filled the screens. It was grainy, black and white, a street camera, time-stamped at almost 3 a.m, on the night my apartment was trashed. It showed Rafe, lifting me effortlessly, carrying me across the threshold of the white piling estate. It was an image of pure intimacy. This wasn't a rescue, was it? Miss Quinn Dunn sneered. This was a transaction. You for his protection, a quid pro quo. He lifted you up, didn't he? The jury murmured. This looked bad. This looked exactly like what he was implying. I felt Rafe's eyes on me, but I didn't look at him. I looked at Dunn, and I smiled. Yes, I said, my voice clear and calm, cutting through the whispers. He did. He lifted me up. I turned to the jury. He lifted me up that night when I had just seen my son's picture destroyed and I was too terrified to stand on my own. And he lifted me up at the diner when I had collapsed from exhaustion and starvation, and my own manager was yelling at me to get back to work. He lifted me up when I was invisible, when I was disposable, and when no one else in this city would even offer a hand. I leaned forward. You're damn right he lifted me up. He has been lifting me up ever since. Dunn's smile vanished. He had nothing. The defense, Amaya said, standing, calls one final witness, Mr. Travis Pike. The doors opened. Travis walked in. He was sober, pale, and wearing a borrowed suit that was too big. He looked terrified, but he looked at me, and I nodded. He sat on the stand. Mr. Pike, Amaya said, did Tin Crown or anyone associated with Wyatt Heller pay you to give false statements to the press regarding Miss Quinn and Mr. Calderon? Travis swallowed, his hands gripping the railing. Yes, ma'am. How much? $500, he whispered. Ashamed. I needed it. They told me what to say, that Rafe was holding my son hostage, that Mara was an addict. And why are you here today? Mr. Pike, are you being paid? Travis looked at me, his eyes wet. No, ma'am, I'm here because my son, Eli, he had an attack the night of the bridge, and I was the one who was there. I was working at the kitchen, sweeping floors. I gotta be the one to help him. I'm here because I want my son to know that, just once. His father did the right thing. It was devastating. It was the truth. Amaya had one more move. I recall Teo to the stand. Teo, energized, took the stand. The prosecution showed you edited footage. Amaya said, Mr. Teo, can you please play the full, unedited audio and video feeds from the bait container and your own surveillance, recorded at the Golden Long Tea Trestle? Yes, I can. The courtroom was plunged into the storm. We saw the chaos, but this time, we heard it. We heard Rafe's voice, clear and cold over the comms. All Harbor Light units, hold. I repeat, hold your positions. We do not engage. We do not fire first. We saw the red laser dot appear on Rafe's chest. We saw me tackle him. We saw Teo activate the SOS. We saw the clean CSD unit, the second unit, arrive. Not in response to an ambush, but in response to our signal for help. The jury was transfixed. The lies had been burned away. The judge called a recess. When he returned, his face was like thunder. Based on the evidence presented by the defense, the judge declared, his voice booming, this court orders an immediate, separate investigation into Commissioner Yovich and the internal practices of the Fiscal Integrity Commission. I am unsealing the transit warrants for the Greystone Timber Company. He scanned the papers. These documents show a clear pattern of bribery and favoritism signed off by members of the FIC. This is a disgrace. He looked at Rafe. Mr. Calderon, on the primary charges of racketeering, conspiracy, and assault on a city officer, this court finds you not guilty on all counts. I grabbed Rafe's hand under the table, my nails digging into his skin. He squeezed back, hard. However, the judge continued, based on Mr. Harlan Stokes' own testimony regarding the initial warehouse infiltration, the court finds the Harbor Light Fund guilty of 1 count of civil trespass and tampering with a sealed customs site. A fine of $50,000 is assessed. It was nothing. It was a token. It was the concession Amaya had predicted. It was a win. Furthermore, the judge concluded, all evidence from this trial will be transferred to the U.S. Attorney's Office for a full federal indictment against Wyatt and Boone Heller and the entire Tin Crown enterprise. It was over. We stood, the courtroom buzzing. Rafe turned to me, his eyes dark, not with relief, but with a deep, profound gratitude. He didn't speak. He just held my gaze. Amaya was packing her briefcase, a small, victorious smile on her face. It's a good day, boss. Just then, a court aide ran into the room, his face sheet white, and shoved his phone at the prosecutor. At the same time, Amaya's phone buzzed, and Harlan's, and Teo's. Amaya looked at her screen, the color drained from her face. Rafe, she said, her voice a sudden, sharp whisper of ice. Rafe looked at her, his moment of peace shattering. It's an emergency broadcast from the federal holding facility, Wyatt Heller. He never made it to processing. He's escaped. My hand flew to my mouth. Amaya read the alert aloud. He overpowered 2 marshals and is at large. He's sent a message to the press. What did it say? Rafe's voice was deadly. Amaya looked at him, her eyes wide with terror. He said, if I can't have the harbor, no one can. I'm going to burn it to the waterline, starting with Calderon's kitchens. Tonight. The final night came with the wind. The lake was a black, roaring beast, and Pier 7 felt like the last piece of land on Earth. Wyatt was loose, and he was coming. Evacuate the volunteers, now, Rafe commanded. His voice was the calm center of the storm. Harlan and Teo were already moving, ushering the night shift kitchen staff to armored vans. Get the press out. Get the clean CSD units into a perimeter, but tell them to stay back until he's contained. He turned to me. Eli was already safe, miles away at the estate with the sitter and 2 of Rafe's best men. You're next. Mara, go to him. No, I said. His head snapped toward me, his eyes flashing with a cold fire I hadn't seen since the trial. That was not a request. Neither is this, I said, tapping the computer terminal Teo had set up. I designed the flow for these kitchens. I also helped Teo integrate the new high-pressure water suppression system. The sensors are my design. If he cuts the power, that system has to be manually overridden and zoned, or the pressure will drop. I'm the only one who knows the bypass. I am not leaving the kitchen. Mara, I will have Harlan carry you out of here. And I'll fight him the whole way, I said, meeting his gaze. You said we changed the rules. This is my kitchen. This is my city. He's not burning it. For a long second, we were in a standoff, more intense than the one in the warehouse. He saw the steel in my spine. He nodded, once, a look of terrifying respect, and tossed me a radio. Stay in the control room. Do not leave. Teo, Harlan, with me. We didn't have to wait long. We heard him before we saw him, the roar of a diesel engine, pushed past its limit. He's here, Harlan's voice crackled over the radio. He's not being subtle. He has a tanker truck. I looked at the monitor. A massive silver tanker truck, flammable plastered on the side, was barreling down the pier, smashing through the CSD barricades. Wyatt was at the wheel, his face a mask of manic glee. He's going to detonate it inside the kitchen, I yelled. Rafe ran from the cover of the main warehouse, straight into the truck's path, waving his arms, trying to get Wyatt to swerve, to stop him from reaching the main building. Wyatt saw him and laughed, turning the wheel hard. The truck skidded on the wet pavement, the massive tanker jackknifing. It missed Rafe by inches, but it didn't stop. It crashed, with the sound of tortured metal, straight into the main steel support pylon of the pier's loading bay. Sparks, bright and terrifying, exploded into the night. The tanker hadn't ruptured, but the truck's engine was on fire, and the ground was suddenly slick with spilled solvent. He's gonna light it, Teo yelled. Mara, now Rafe roared into the radio. I was already there. My hands flew across the control panel, bypassing the heat sensors, hitting the manual override. Pumps are at 100%, activating Zone 1. The world exploded in water. The high-pressure nozzles I had designed, the ones meant to put out a grease fire, erupted. A targeted artificial deluge crashed down, enveloping the smoking truck, dousing the sparks, soaking Wyatt as he tried to climb from the cab, and creating a wall of water between the fire and the kitchen. Wyatt emerged, soaked and furious, but the game wasn't over. He was holding a detonator. It wasn't just the truck. Calderon, he screamed, his voice raw. He ran, not at Rafe, but at me. As I stepped from the control room, he grabbed me, pulling me against his chest, his arm tight around my throat. He pressed the cold, hard square of the detonator to my temple. I rigged the pilings under the kitchen. I lose. You lose. This whole pier goes to the bottom of the lake. Rafe froze. Harlan and Teo, who'd been moving in, also stopped. Let her go. Wyatt, Rafe said, his voice level, walking slowly into the light, his hands raised. He was unarmed. Drop your weapons, Wyatt shrieked. I don't have any, Rafe said, stopping a safe distance away. It's just me. You're done. The LHJB is on its way. The Lake Harbor Joint Bureau. They're federal. You can't bribe them. You can't escape them. I don't need to escape. Wyatt's eyes were wild, the solvent and the rain making him look inhuman. I'll take her, the kitchen and you, all to hell. You're not burning a kitchen. Wyatt, Rafe said, his voice suddenly calm, conversational. You're burning memories. You're burning the one hot meal a dock worker gets on a 12-hour shift. You're burning the one safe place for a dozen families in this neighborhood. You want to destroy this city. You're not destroying the buildings. You're destroying that. Go ahead. Push the button. Show them all you're nothing but a man who burns soup. Wyatt stared at him, his arm tightening at my throat. He was confused, enraged by the words, by the lack of fear in Rafe's eyes. He was processing. It was the 1 second I needed. My eyes darted to the side. A heavy mooring rope, thick and coiled, was sitting on a cleat just 2 feet away. My hand, the one he wasn't watching, shot out. I didn't grab it. I swiped it, hooking the coiled loop. In the same instant, I stomped my heel down hard on Wyatt's instep and threw my head back into his nose. He roared in pain, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. I didn't try to run. I looped the rope around his arm, the one holding the detonator, and pulled, yanking him off balance. Rafe saw the move. He didn't hesitate. He lunged. He didn't hit Wyatt. He grabbed the rope with me. We pulled together, a violent, desperate tug. Wyatt's hand, slick with rain and now tangled in rope, opened. The detonator flew from his grasp. It spun, end over end, in a perfect, horrible arc, sailing over the pier railing. It hit the black water with a small plip. We all froze. A column of white water, 100 feet high, erupted from the lake. The sound hit us a second later, a deep, concussive thoom that rattled my teeth and shook the pier to its foundations. But it was in the water. It was harmless. Wyatt stared at the plume, his face blank with shock. That was all the time Harlan needed. He hit Wyatt from behind, a single professional blow, and Wyatt Heller collapsed, unconscious, onto the wet pier. It was over. The sirens that followed were new. The flashing lights were red and blue. Cars from the Lake Harbor Joint Bureau swarmed the pier. They were quiet, federal, and efficient. They cuffed Wyatt, read him his rights, and helped a trembling Teo out of the control room. One of Rafe's men brought a car, and Harlan stepped out carrying a sleepy, confused Eli, wrapped in a blanket. I ran, my legs shaking, and pulled my son into my arms, burying my face in his hair. He was safe. Flashbulbs erupted. The press, held back by the perimeter, had been let in. They were everywhere. I looked up, blinded, clutching Eli. Rafe was standing right behind me. He didn't look at the cameras. He just looked at me. He placed one large, steady hand on my shoulder, his other on Eli's head. The image that ran in the papers the next day wasn't of a mafia boss. It was of a protector. It was a man shielding his family. It was a promise. Dawn broke over a lake of silver. Kitchen number 1 reopened, the smell of fresh coffee and baking bread chasing away the ghosts of solvent and fear. Rafe found me on the roof, watching the gulls. He stood beside me, quiet for a long time. The board met this morning. He said, "They're officially offering you the position, Director of Spatial Design for the entire Lake Meal Network." I smiled. I accept. "And," he continued, "they've approved the establishment of the Harbor Light Scholarship for Safe Kitchens. It's a grant program for women, single mothers, who want to go into the trades or design. They asked if I would chair it. I said I would, but only if you would co-chair with me." I turned to look at him. His face was calm in the morning light, but his eyes were full of a deep, steady warmth. I looked at his arm. The graze from the bridge had healed, leaving a faint, puckered scar on his forearm. I reached out, my fingers tracing the new line. He turned his arm, capturing my hand in his. He stepped closer, resting his forehead against mine. His other hand found my waist, pulling me gently against him. It wasn't the desperate, starved kiss of our first night. It was slow. It was certain. It was a deep, quiet promise that tasted of coffee and the clean morning air. His arms wrapped around me, holding me tight, and I felt his breath even out, matching mine, in time with the sound of the gulls. "Home," I whispered. My eyes closed. "Home is where you fell," he whispered back, his lips brushing my temple, "and I was there to lift you up." The epilogue wrote itself. Eli, now 5, ran laughing through the new kitchen, his drawing given the place of honor by the door a picture of the pier, with no smoke, just a bright sun. The local news praised the Lake Meal Network, the new standard in community safety. Rafe, true to his word, stepped back. He handed over the keys of his legitimate shipping operations to the new, publicly run New Greystone Port Authority, accepting a role as a citizen consultant, the Harbor Light Circle, the name whispered in alleys, faded in its place. The Harbor Light Logistics Group emerged, a clean, multi-million-dollar corporation. Love doesn't erase sin. It doesn't wash the ink from the ledger. It can't change the past. but it can force a strong man to choose, to protect instead of destroy, to build instead of break. In Port Greystone, the wind still blows cold off the lake, but here, when someone falls, when they are exhausted and broken and have nothing left, there is always a hand, strong and sure, ready to lift them, gently, to lift them into a new life. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Please share your city or country in the comments below so we can connect. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. If you enjoyed this, please also support us by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by many more.